sealed the Lamu Port, LAPSET, Lamu Port, South Sudan, and the Ethiopia Transit Corridor. We came up with Konza City, ICT City. We came up with tourist cities which have not been constructed: Mombasa, Lamu, Isiolo, Lake Turkana. The special economic zones, Mombasa, Lamu, and Kisumu, plus Nairobi. All those were projects to propel us to the attainment of Vision 2030. We had said we needed to have a properly disciplined and highly trained manpower, which is a prerequisite for that kind of development. So when we started, we did achieve. When we first came into government in 1963, we found almost an empty coffers. This is 2003. The government was depending on IMF and World Bank. And when the Paris Club closed on the government, there was nothing. So when we came in, we had made a promise to introduce a free primary education. And the president then insisted we must introduce free primary education. But money was not there. We found the government was raising very little money out of taxes. It is not the issue of introducing taxation, different all forms of taxes. It does not help if it is leaking. You can have so many taxes introduced. You punish the population, but there's very little out of it. So we addressed this issue. When we addressed it, we had insufficient funds. So later on, a friend of mine, the former president of Tanzania, Mr. Magufuli, when I went to attend his inauguration ceremony, he asked me to remain behind. After he had met with all the heads of states. And when we met, he told me, look, Raila, me and you have been ministers of roads. And I know how to run ministries. But me, I have never been a president. You have been a prime minister. You know how to run a government. I want you to advise me how to manage my government. I spent 3 days with my friend, Gideon Moi. We talked about many other things, but simply put, see, it boils down to just two things: income and expenditure. Full stop. The rest are details. Here, you need to look at what are your sources of income. You must have proper income, and most of them are through taxation. That is where accountants now come in. You have got people, there's income tax, there's customs, there's VAT, all the forms of income. And then expenditure. So we found that there were leakages first in terms of income. The government was supposed to be collecting taxes, but very little of those taxes were getting into government coffers. Most of it was going into the pockets of officers. So we created a lot of ticks in between, which were basically taking most of this. You see, you found that the revenue officers were the boys in town. They're the ones who are buying apartment blocks in town. The ones who are driving the latest models of cars in town. The ones who are building castles in the village. The ones who are building high-rise buildings in village markets. So if you do a lifestyle audit, you can nab all of them. This is what we did. And we fired a number of them, retained those who are retainable. Then all of a sudden, the income begin to rise. On the other side is expenditure. Each and every ministry had a revenue, had a procurement officer seconded from the treasury. And these were accountants, procurement officers. There was a requirement under the Nyayo that any procurement above 100,000 shillings had to be done competitively. In other words, you have to advertise in at least 3 newspapers, and there must be at least 3 companies bidding, and then you select the lowest. We found out that each and every procurement officer had 3 companies registered in his or her name. So that, and then there's no collusion. It's known that the procurement officer in education supplies health. The one who health supplies agriculture. And agriculture supplies transport, and so on and so forth. Whenever there is any kind of a tender, in one ministry, only one fellow would tender. 3 companies all belonging to one person. And you pick the lowest. An item that is supposed to cost 100,000 shillings is bought at 1 million shillings. Then this is now shared among them. So government was procuring very expensively. There was no value for money. First, revenue is not coming, relative is coming, unless that comes, it's also wasted on this other side. When we plugged both these sides, the revenue side, the revenue went up. And then procurement side we also dealt with. Then the cost of procurement also went down, and there was also quality. When I was Minister for Roads and Public Works, I found when tarmacking of a standard 1 kilometer road, 5.5 meters with the width, was an average of 55 million shillings per kilometer. 55 million shillings per kilometer. I sat down with my engineers because at that time the cost of constructing a road per kilometer in Uganda was cheaper than in Kenya. I asked, why should a construction be cheaper in Uganda, as Uganda is getting raw materials from Kenya? Bitumen and all these things are coming from Kenya to Uganda. It does not make sense. So we sat down and came out. There's a quantity surveyor, there's a civil engineer, we had even an architect, and all these officers. And I told him, convince me as an engineer why this should happen. And we went to the quantities. We managed to reduce the cost from 55 million shillings per kilometer to 25 per kilometer. And we introduced a new gauge, 6 meters instead of 5.5. And better quality, we were able to do it. From 55 million to 25 million, we reduced. So we therefore, within a very short period of time, we had sufficient revenue. 95% of our development budget was being domestically financed. We're only relying on 5% from donors. And everybody who was there knew how much infrastructure we were able to develop at that time. This is not rocket science. So it's not a question of adding more taxes. You add more taxes, until now the people cannot pay it. You are milking the cow until no blood is coming. There's no more milk. But what you do is, what you are collecting, look at where it is leaking and plug those loopholes. Then you have sufficient funds for development. This is what would happen in Australia. This is an advice that I'm giving to the government. Now that I'm here, and Mheshimiwa just talks, I can be allowed to say something about the CDF. This is an issue, it's a burning issue. We created devolution, a devolved structure of government, because we found that a unitary system of government was very inefficient. And there was also regional imbalances in development. That's why we created devolution. But so many people did not want to hear about devolution. And we said, you create devolution, you will bring units down. There's a national government and a county government. These county governments are supposed to do certain things which are provided for in the Constitution. But before that, before the devolution, we had introduced CDF because the national government was distributing resources in a very discriminatory manner. That's why we introduced CDF. But CDF ideally should now, in the devolved system, there's no need for a CDF. CDF should be the responsibility of the county government. Members of parliament are supposed to do three things: representation, legislation, and oversight. They should oversight the national government. How do we oversight the national government when you yourself are also implementing projects? Construct roads. Now they're doing what is so-called public participation, asking the public. But I just want to tell them, do all the public participation you want. Ultimately, you must go to a referendum. In the referendum, you will lose. It does not happen in another country. It's not that we don't want bursaries. Yes, bursaries should be there, but bursaries should be distributed by the county government, not by members of parliament, not by MCAs. This is very important. It's very critical in terms of division of responsibilities to government. You have got legislature, you've got judiciary, you've got executive. It's very important. And if this happens, you will see that a lot of development will take place in the counties. I'm not defending the governors. Those who are corrupt should face the law. Those who are corrupt should face the law. But it is not, does not make any sense when a president goes to launch a road in a constituency and the contractor is the member of parliament from the next constituency. The contractor. It does not make any sense at all. So this is what is happening here is primitive. We need to discard it, and we need to allow the CDF money and all that road maintenance funds to go to the county government so that the county government can be able to discharge their constitutional duties. This is a point I wanted to make. I know I'm not debated for my subject. But generally, let me say that accountants do a very important role in governance. And what you guys are doing is commendable because you're trying to set up standards for accounting officers in the country, which is really required so that the country can be able to develop in a much more faster way. We have one country only, and this country we must protect and defend. Kenya has real potential. But Kenya has lagged behind because of policies which have been followed in the past. In 1963, as we attained independence, Kenya's economy was equivalent to that of South Korea. Kenya, Ghana, and South Korea were at the same comparable state of economic development. Now, 62 years later, things have changed. In 1963, the levels of industrialization, the GDP, the per capita income, the levels of literacy, the levels of health service provision and so on were comparable, Kenya and South Korea. Now, today, South Korea's economy is 45 times bigger than that of Kenya. You need to ask yourself, what did the Koreans did right that Kenya got wrong? If you answer that question, then you are on the way to answering the Kenyan's problem. And I'm sure the answer is known. What we need to do, we just have to